Welcome, you're watching the news track. I'm Rahul. Kanwal. The Israel Defense Forces getting set for an all-out ground offensive on the Gaza Strip. On the news track tonight, 4 leading international military strategists will be joining me to give our viewers a sense of what to expect when this phase of urban battle begins. How long is it likely to go on for? How hard will the Hamas be able to fight back? And will this battle likely escalate to include the Hezbollah, Syria and Iran? All that and more coming up on the news track.
Endgame Gaza. But invasion won't be easy. Will Israel be trapped in brutal urban warfare? Hamas may have already war-gamed this. Past invasions have backfired. What happens next? That is a big focus on News Track.
On the news track tonight, Gila Gamliel, key confidant of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, senior minister in the Israel government, the Minister for Intelligence, will be joining me on the news track. The first minister from the government of Israel to speak to an Indian news channel after this conflict began. Gila Gamliel coming up on the news track tonight. I want to start by asking Colonel Liam Collins at the Modern War Institute about this third ground assault on the Gaza Strip, and how long do you think this is likely to go on for? The IDF very clearly getting set for this ground assault. How much of a resistance do you think the Hamas will be able to put up, given the fact that they've been badly pulverized from the air over the past 11 days?
Yeah, I mean, Hamas will still be able to put up significant resistance, right? If you just go back to some of Israel's, earlier conflicts, these, insurgent terrorist fighters, they may not have the mass numbers of a conventional force, but they can put up resistance, right? Moving in tunnels from one location to another, seemingly popping in and out of, different stories of different buildings from underground tunnels. So they can put up, some stiff resistance. As far as how long it'll go on, I think it will only go on for for a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and not because that means that Israel will be successful about destroying Hamas, which they're not capable of. But I think it has more to do with the way Israel's defense is established. Right, they activate hundreds of thousands of reservists. They can't keep them mobilized for too long because they have to go back to work and keep the economy going. So I think it's more of once they get to a satisfactory solution, they've eliminated enough of Hamas's capability, enough of their fighters, they'll do it. But in terms of, if they want to, control that city and own it, I mean, look, it took the Russians throwing everything they got at Bakhmut, and it took them 10 months to get that. So I think it'll be more of a limited objective to really degrade Hamas, not destroy Hamas. And then that'll take, I think less than 2 months.
You're saying that this military operation could take up to about 2 months. One of the big challenges that the Israel Defense Forces will face is the underground network of tunnels that the Hamas has built. Now, Yaakov Lapin, we know that the Israel Air Force has been targeting these underground tunnels and that several of them have been destroyed. What's your best sense at this moment of the kind of capacity the Hamas has, given what's happened in the past 11 days, to push back? Was the Hamas, in your view, already preparing and planning because they knew that after the kind of attack they staged, the IDF will come in? Has that already been thought through, or do you think they're a very battered and bruised force at this moment?
I think that they are battered, and they absolutely knew that the IDF would launch a ground offensive. They clearly factored that into this attack. Actually, since Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2007 through a violent coup, it began building its terrorist army, this Iranian-sponsored terrorist army, and that includes thousands of kilometers collectively under Gaza combat tunnels to move fighters and weapons around. And they've also, set up these command and attack posts in multi-story buildings so that they can have a good command of the combat area when they expect the Israeli forces to come in. They've spent years building this terrorist army, embedding it into the civilian population center, and therefore when the Israeli ground forces have to move in, they will be facing threats from 360 degrees, from above, from those tall buildings, as well as from drones, from the surface level, and from underneath from the tunnels. And that is what the IDF has been training for years. So those are the kinds of challenges they're going to have to deal with.
No, so what part of the Hamas's military capacity, according to you, Yaakov Lapin, have been degraded because of the aerial attacks? And how much of a military structure do they still have to be able to take on the IDF when it does come in?
I think, that we can roughly say, without seeing the actual intelligence, what we can roughly say is that Hamas has been battered, but it's been very far from being destroyed, because in order to reach those core, what they call in the military, the centers of gravity of this terror army, the command levels, the command posts, the attack posts, the ability to produce weapons, the ability to fire weapons, and the thousands of terrorists that make up the military wing, that can only be done through a ground offensive, really going from street to street, bunker to bunker, neighborhood to neighborhood. So they're battered, but they will only be demolished as a fighting terrorist force by forces on the ground, by boots on the ground.
General Dillon, we saw during the Russia-Ukraine war questions being asked about the future of armored warfare, tank warfare, especially now with drones, the ability to be able to penetrate a tank from the top with a precision fire. The Hamas showed incredible military sophistication in the attack that it mounted on the 7th of October. But we also know that the Israelis have been looking at what happened in that Russia-Ukraine war and learning those lessons. From what you understand, how do you see this phase of urban warfare progress once it starts?
Good evening, Rahul. At the outset, I must put a caution that no two battlefronts, no two battlegrounds, no two battles are the same.
Sure.
We are just talking about Russia-Ukraine vis-a-vis Hamas, Israel or IDF. We must understand Gaza Strip is only 365 square kilometers of the real estate. North-south, it's about 40-42 kilometers. East-west, it is from 8 kilometers to 12 kilometers max. Tank warfare needs maneuver space. It needs elbow space. Wherever, say, it's about 8 to 10 kilometers of width of Gaza Strip, only about 500 meters to 1 kilometer towards the Mediterranean Sea, and similar distance towards the buffer zone on the east is what is clear area where the tank columns can move freely. In between, 6 to 8 kilometers is very thickly populated, densely populated, built-up area, multi-story concrete, as the co-panelists were saying, the tunnels underneath. So this is going to be a very, very sluggish battle, and it has its own complications. I said maneuver space, so armor columns cannot be used in conventional tactical assault formations, where you line up with intercept distance of 50 meters to 300 meters, depending on the visibility and the type of threat from the enemy, and you go tally-ho. It's going to be house by house, lane by lane, block by block clearing. And what are the problems of built-up area of such density, where multi-story buildings with windows, doors opening onto the streets, lanes and the by-lanes? A well-sighted sniper can stop a platoon for 3 to 5 hours by shifting room to room, shifting window to window, carrying his ammunition boxes, carrying his belt boxes. And the columns who are in the lane or on the street, they are vulnerable for attack from the ground level or fire from the 7th floor of a building, which they may not be able to see. So, and then the tunnels inside, underneath, they will be heavily booby-trapped. Once the Hamas vacates those tunnels and moves out, melting in the civilian population, they will leave them highly booby-trapped, so any entry into that would be very risky, and we don't think I don't think the Israeli forces would physically enter those tunnels. They will have the deep search detection systems. They would have activated their human intelligence assets, who would tell them the exact location of the tunnels, the explosives, the ammunition which are dumped there, and then they will destroy them by top attack ammunition, by either from air or from drone, or by direct firing of weapons, who would have been able to reach there.
Professor Ifram
So
Inbar,
classical armor assault,
given the
or
fact
even
that
for that
on the 7th of October, the Hamas mounted the kind of attack that it did, has led many to wonder whether they've actually prepared for the next round. Because when you go in and attack Israel in the way that you do, in the way that they did, they know that there will be a very massive pushback. Do you think they've thought this through in terms of their strategy for this phase of war as well, and are prepared for what Israel is bringing? Or is it that now, because they pulled off that attack, people are over-assuming what the Hamas is actually capable of? Because it's not a proper military force. They were just a group of terrorists to stage a spectacular account, but can't possibly have war-gamed this all the way through.
The Hamas strategy is quite clear.
exactly.
They provoke Israel to attack. There are not too many routes to attack. And they don't mind having many losses. They'll retreat, hoping that the international community will intervene, particularly after pictures of coming out of Gaza, and will stop Israelis to continue their mission, hoping that they will be able to exact many casualties in order to change the mood in Israel. This is a strategy, and it remains to be seen if they will be successful. Anything less than dismantling the military capabilities of Hamas will be considered in Israel as a failure. And maybe they think that they have a chance to prevent this type of outcome.
What is Hamas's end game according to you, given the fact that they attacked the way that they did on the 7th of October? From your experience at the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, what do you think the Hamas is expecting to do? Because you're looking at this battle from Israel's perspective. Let's just spin that on a moment. In this phase, when the IDF comes in, what's the Hamas expecting? Because in none of these scenarios does the Hamas actually win. They can delay, stall, make the Israel defense forces take losses, but there's no way that that the Hamas actually wins.
Allow me to disagree. I think that they have already scored a great success in eroding seriously the Israeli deterrence. And this is exactly why Israel is so determined to finish Hamas. They were successful. They hope to cause many more casualties to Israel, which will add to their success. And this is their endgame. And don't forget, this is an organization that believes that God is on their side. And you don't have a really more powerful actor in the world than God. And so they are waiting for an Israeli attack to fail.
Colonel Collins, do you buy that theory that from Israel's perspective, Professor Inbar saying Hamas's perspective is that they've already won, and as Israel comes in, as their casualties mount, that's even more victory looked at from Hamas's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Hamas is right. I mean, they're playing a long game on this, and they knew there was going to be retaliation. They expected Israel to come in, and it was meant to provoke it. So in their mind, that's a win, just as right Al-Qaeda in Iraq when the American forces went into Fallujah the first time and then stopped that operation because they were worried about collateral damage. Then Zarqawi viewed that as a win for Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So I think that's historically, if you look, they will view these kind of operations. They went in, killed a lot of Israelis. The Israelis will come in there and do some significant destruction. But in their mind, that was a tactical, maybe even operational, strategic victory for them.
Okay, I want to just step out for a moment and look at whether this is likely to escalate into a two-front conflict. And if it does, then can Israel take on both the Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the Hezbollah in the West Bank and in Lebanon? So let me put that question to Colonel Collins first. Looked at from the outside, of course, we know that the Israeli Defense Forces are the most competent army in the Gulf Arab area, but we also know that Iran has been training the Hezbollah, and the Hezbollah is now better armed than it has already been, and we've already seen the Hamas's capabilities. How is it likely to turn into two-front war, and if it does, how is that likely to go militarily?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question we're waiting on. If you look historically, the evidence would tell you there's a good probability that it will happen to be a two-front war, right? If Lebanese Hezbollah want to bog Israel down and keep them from committing all of their energy into Gaza, then that's entirely plausible. And again, looking historically, it's more likely than not that will happen, but it doesn't mean that it will happen.
Yaakov Lapin, your sense of whether it is probable or inevitable that this is likely to turn into a two-front war, and if the Hezbollah does get involved, how do you see that Iran versus Hamas and Hezbollah simultaneously, that war play out?
Well, let's look at what's already happened. The Lebanese arena is already involved. For the past 5 days, there hasn't been a day that's gone by without anti-tank fire attacks from Hezbollah, attempts to cross the border by terror cells. We've had casualties in Israel, and Hezbollah has sustained casualties in Israeli return fire. So it's already involved. Relatively speaking, it's at a low level, and this is very deliberate. We had the Iranian foreign minister very recently in Lebanon coordinating. Lebanon is actually, really held hostage by Hezbollah, which is an Iranian terrorist army, just like Hamas, but far, far bigger. And what we're seeing is Iran synchronizing its entire regional access and getting ready for the next phases of this war. And the instructions that the Iranians appear to have given to their proxies in Lebanon, Hezbollah, is harass Israel, keep it focused on the north so that it can't focus on the south fully like it wants to, but also it's willing to take the risk of that deteriorating into a full war. I don't think Hezbollah is deterred by that at all. It's willing to take that risk and to fulfill Iranian orders.
No, so let's look at it militarily. If we were to war game this, now the Hezbollah has been attacking and the Israelis counter-attacking in southern Lebanon and in the West Bank on a limited basis. Do you see this escalate into an all-out war? And if the Israeli army is fighting the Hezbollah and the Hamas simultaneously, how is that war likely to go? And why I ask this question is because in the past, when Israel has gone to war with Arab countries, very often the effort, for example, in the 1973 war also was to ensure that civilians weren't impacted in quite the way that the Hamas did. They just came in and killed whoever they came. It wasn't a combatant versus combatant war, it was a combatant versus non-combatant war as well. So how do you see that going, Yaakov Lapin?
Well, in many ways, what Hamas did on the 7th of October, this mass murder invasion of border communities, is exactly what Hezbollah had been planning to do for northern communities right near the border for many years. They even boasted of these plans invading the Galilee region, which is the Israeli region next to Lebanon. So Hamas did it first, and that means that Hezbollah has lost an element of surprise. So it may still, if it decides to enter this war fully, then it may still try to invade northern Israel with its terror death squads, just as Hamas did. But it would run into a far more ready Israeli military, heavily deployed along the northern border. I would expect the Israeli Air Force to lead the Israeli response in the northern arena for the first stage. If that actually escalates, I would expect it to unleash levels of firepower that we have not seen, not in this conflict, and I don't think in this region. And I think that warning has been sent to Hezbollah and to Iran very, very clearly. We've also got 2 U.S. Strike carrier groups, one in the Mediterranean, one making its way into the Mediterranean. That's an American deterrent signal to Hezbollah and to Iran, which has yet to be tested. So we're seeing certainly, all of the actors in this conflict and potential actors getting their positions ready for a broadening of this conflict. And above all of this is an Iranian threat saying that if Israel moves into Gaza, which it surely will, they will activate additional fronts. The extent of that activation remains to be
Do you buy that? Is that an empty threat, or do you think the Iranians will walk the talk?
Well, they're already doing it. Okay, this is the thing we have to, I think, get our heads around. They are already attacking Israel from Lebanon, and we've had Israeli casualties. And if
No,
there
but those
wasn't
are
a war going
limited. Those are limited battles at this moment. My question is it possible
Yes.
that the state of Iran gets involved against the state of Israel as an open, all-out attack?
The Iranians prefer to do their wars via proxy. This is exactly why they funded and built Hezbollah on Israel's northern border and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The proxy warfare is the preferred manner of attack that Iran has been building. I mean, they will prefer to keep it that way, but they are making threats. And I think that it has probably been told to them that they are not immune, and that if this war escalates, targets in Iran themselves could be exposed to firepower strikes. So we will simply have to wait and see.
Professor Inbar, we know that President Biden has deputed 2 aircraft carrier groups in the waters around Israel and Palestine. Now, there are questions about whether the Americans will get involved militarily. Is this just signaling and posturing? Are the Americans actually likely to deploy their troops and their weapon systems? And the question of whether Israel will want America to get involved militarily. To have their backing is one thing, to actually want for American troops on the ground. What's your reading on that?
Obviously, Israel doesn't want American troops to fight for it. This has been the Israeli line from its very inception, and this is why it is popular in the United States. It is basically the Churchillian line: give us the means and we'll do the job. I'm not sure that the American presence in the Eastern Mediterranean nowadays will have a deterring effect on Iran. We shouldn't forget that Iran, at this time, is attacking vessels, Navy vessels of the United States in the Indian Ocean. And they are trying to attack Americans in Iraq, in other places. So I must say that the calculation, the strategic calculation of Iran is not entirely clear to me. It depends. If they think that this is an opportunity to conclude successfully their population-centric strategy with a multi-front war, one of the goals of Hamas obviously was to ignite a multi-front war, which is not only Hezbollah in the north, but also attacks from Syria, which happened already, as well as some kind of guerrilla warfare or terrorist attacks from the West Bank, and even to include riots or other disrupting activities on part of the Israeli Arabs. If in Tehran they believe, if their perception is that this is a ripe moment for doing it, I believe they will activate Hezbollah to the best of their capabilities. If they don't see this an opportunity, they may not want to spare Hezbollah, which is basically their most effective deterrent against Israel at this stage. It remains to be seen.
What's your reading of the strategic calculation in Iran? Will they want to activate the Hezbollah in an all-out offense against the Israelis like the Hamas went all out, or do you think they want to hold this asset back for some other time?
I think they would like to do it. I'm not sure their evaluation is that this is the right moment. This is exactly the dilemma in Iran.
Colonel Collins, 2 American aircraft strike groups in the waters around Israel. Are they there just as a deterrent posture, or will President Biden send his planes and his men and women in if Israel were to face a multi-pronged attack?
Yeah, I mean, this is purely a deterrent measure. As the other speakers have said, Iran is not going to get directly involved, right? They work through the proxies. That works for them better politically and strategically. And Israel doesn't need or want U.S. assistance, right? They're one of the most powerful militaries in the world. For them, it would show weakness if they need, right, any kind of air support or something like that. So at least for the current fight in Gaza, or if it goes into Lebanon, they're capable of doing that themselves. They don't want the assistance. It's really just a deterrent from Iran, I guess, getting involved directly. I mean, it's already, pretty, involvement through support to Hamas or Hezbollah, but it's really a deterrent from more involvement.
General Dillon, looked at from your lens, share your assessment of whether you see this conflict escalate first to the Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, then becoming bigger. We're already seeing Vladimir Putin go meet Xi Jinping. We're already seeing the fact that Iran is acting in close concert with anti-America countries. Do you see this becoming a much bigger nightmare? Do you think it will remain localized and regional?
When Hamas came into Israeli territory on 7th of October, and now we are almost 11, 12 days into past that incident, if it was such a coordinated thing, it would have started showing signs by now. Since no signs of this coordination or synergy between all the forces or all the countries which you named have emerged so far, so it's safe to assume, and as a military commander, I will never speculate, I will always go by the military battle indications. As of now, the battle indications are that those countries are not going to get involved directly at a larger scale. However, smaller scale skirmishes just to prove a point and show their solidarity that tomorrow so nobody will tell them you didn't come in. So that type of actions will happen. And similarly, coming to the point of US direct involvement, United States boots on ground or aircrafts in the sky are not going to happen because Israel does not really need it. What Israel will need and what United States or other allies can provide is the intelligence, good quality intelligence, real-time intelligence, give out the target objectives which are getting activated, and Israel has the wherewithal from within their own means to neutralize those objectives. So intelligence sharing will happen, it has always been happening, but it will happen at more real-time and at a larger scale. As regards the other countries getting involved, I don't see the possibility at a large scale in the near future.
Okay. The government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel has promised an all-out offensive in the Gaza Strip till the time the Hamas is completely destroyed. To get a sense of the thinking in Tel Aviv at this moment, we're joined by Gila Gamliel, Minister of Intelligence, a veteran member of the Israeli Parliament, and the senior-most minister in the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's speaking to us on India Today. Gila Gamliel, welcome. And I must say, as we start, I must tell you that most watching in India are completely horrified by the atrocities perpetrated by the Hamas and are very strongly in solidarity with the people and the state of Israel.
God bless you. Thank you from Israel. Israel is at war to destroy the capabilities of Hamas, and it is prepared on all fronts, and we will restore Israel's security back. And thank you about your blessing and support. Like you know, the state of Israel will do everything to bring back its abducted citizens. What they did, it's impossible in any kind of understanding how it's possible. That they kidnap a young generation, women, babies, all elders, citizens, innocent citizens, that they went to a party or were in their houses in the south of Israel. And together we will win. Thank you about your support and a lot of supporting from all over the world. Like you know, the price is very heavy, but we will win this war as well.
So let's pack this one by one, Minister. And I want to start by getting you to explain to our viewers in India about how your counter-offensive against the Hamas has shaped up so far. We're seeing Israel prepare for a ground offensive on the Gaza Strip. We're also seeing from southern Lebanon and even from Syria some bombs, mortars being fired in. So how do you describe your preparation and preparedness for this assault against the Gaza Strip?
We are at war. We are at war to destroy the capabilities of Hamas and restore security. We are ready for the continuation of the military campaign. on other fronts as well, including removal of population from threat areas. We are responding forcefully to anyone trying to attack our sovereignty. And of course, we as in Israel will do everything to bring back the abducted. Hamas has committed a war crime by abducting civilians and bears full responsibility for their fate. And like you know, if we see what is happening in the north, so the state of Lebanon is the sovereign of its territory, and it will be held responsible for anything that happens on our north borders. We are striking Hamas decisively. So far, terrorists have been killed, including senior commanders, and thousands of targets have been attacked, including facilities, weaponry, and terror bases. The terrorists will have nowhere to hide, and anywhere there are Hamas terrorists will be turned into ruins. Unfortunately, like you all know, Hamas is operating to murder Israeli citizens while it endangers the residents of Gaza. They are using the residents of Gaza as human shields, while the IDF is operating to protect civilians, making an effort to currently hit terrorists.
So, the Hamas put out...
One more minute. We need to know that the IDF calls upon residents of the north of Gaza Strip to evacuate their homes and to move to the south of Gaza River for the safety of the civilians and to prevent harm to innocent Hamas, to innocent people. And we need to put aside Hamas and the civilians in Gaza Strip. Hamas is preventing the civilians from moving south and is placing them in danger. I believe that not India, not any country, no country in the world will dismiss the deliberate murder of hundreds of innocent civilians. Hamas operated exactly like ISIS and worse. It goes against any sense of human decency and against Islamic teachings. Terror strikes you cannot imagine what it is. They burnt the young generation. They murdered babies in front of the parents. They raped the women. They removing heads from the soldiers. They burned life. A lot of people. Anybody in this world cannot get all this, and this why Israel has the right and the international legitimacy, and we are strong to do it and to take this terror once and for all. And I want to tell you that from the history you can see the things that Israel is dealing with, it's become after that the problems of all the world. The supporting of the world is because we need that it won't become a model for other states from this terror organization. We need to cut it from now, and I really appreciate all your support. Thank you very much.
So what does victory in the Gaza Strip look like to you? We're already seeing many world leaders saying going into Gaza could be very costly for Israel in terms of human lives, in terms of the length of this war. Israel has been in twice, had to come back both times because it's very difficult to rule over a hostile population. What is the end game that the Benjamin Netanyahu government has currently in mind for Gaza?
First of all, we need to that Hamas won't stay anymore. That no Hamas, no their military, no their regime, and not their vision. This is something that a country, like you know, in this situation, under attack, it cannot continue to support its aggressors. So we suspended the supply lines to the Gaza Strip as agreed upon between Netanyahu and President Biden. We brought water supply to the south of the Gaza Strip only in order to amplify pressure on Gaza. But like you can understand, it is suspected that Hamas has taken advantage of humanitarian aid to smuggle weaponry into Gaza. So in the terrorist belongings weapons were found that were smuggled in bags of groceries. So, like you see, we need to be with a very sense. In one hand, to try that the innocent citizen there won't be hurt, but in the other hand, we need to deal with these terrorists and to keep bringing the security for everybody inside Israel. So the security forces are spread throughout Israel, constantly vigilant and on high alert to maintain the security of the citizens of the State of Israel, and we will act with force against any acts of incitement and violence. And,
so it's highly likely, ma'am, that the Israeli Defense Forces will occupy Gaza as you've done in the past. My question was, who will run Gaza once the IDF has occupied Gaza? What's your vision? What's your plan?
First of all, this is not our plan to occupy the Gaza. What we want to do is to take out the Hamas and the Hamas control out of Gaza. This is the mission for us. And what we need to do is, first of all, bringing this understanding that it won't keep anymore any terrorists of Gaza in Gaza from Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
The world's most powerful leader is headed to Israel. American President Joe Biden faces major challenges during this visit. He's declared full support to Israel. He's also trying to ensure that this doesn't become a larger regional conflict, and yet trying to ensure that the doors are open for humanitarian aid to enter the besieged, beleaguered Gaza Strip.
The most powerful man in the world lands in Israel on Wednesday. President Joe Biden arrives in Tel Aviv at a time when Israel's tank regiments are massed along the Gaza frontier, primed and ready to roll in. When he lands, nearly 2 weeks in a historic escalation between the Hamas and Israel, he brings with him a handful of deep anxieties. Biden was unequivocal about his solidarity with Israel from the start.
Bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. Among them, at least 14 American citizens killed.
Biden's visit to Israel will be an incredibly delicate tightrope walk. As the President of the United States, he must come across as nothing but unambiguously supportive of Israel, empathetic to its anger, and understanding of the steps it is now taking.
It matters that Americans see what's happening. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever... Anyway.
At the same time, with the looming election in the United States, the Israel-Gaza conflict widening into more parts of the Middle East will mean the United States has no choice but to get embroiled.
The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense.
Make no mistake, Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas crisis was the most visible from the get-go. It was on day one itself that he ordered America's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, battle group into waters off the coast of Israel as a show of support, solidarity, and to beef up intelligence assistance to the Israeli military.
Biden's visit to Israel would have strategic importance for entire Middle East.
The world already has one big war on its hands in Ukraine. A second could plunge the world into a crisis that goes beyond just economic. Much of what happens next could be in the hands of the most powerful man in the world. Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where I wrap up the news track tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye, good night.